So the hidden wires of our world. It sounds a little dramatic, doesn't it? But these things power pretty much everything we do. And the question we're digging into is a big one. Are they secretly harming our oceans? You are literally using them this very second. Every single time you stream a video, send off an email, or jump on a conference call, you are plugging into this vast, mostly invisible network of cables lying on the bottom of the ocean. You know, a lot of us think it's all satellites, right? Beaming data from space. But that's not really the case. A whopping 99% of all data that crosses an ocean goes through these physical wires. It is a staggering amount of information, the actual lifeblood of our global economy. Let me put it as simply as I can. Without these cables, the internet as you and I know it just stops. Full stop. They are the absolute literal backbone of our connected modern world. Which brings us to the big question, doesn't it? To stay connected, are we breaking the ocean's back? I mean, we're talking about millions of kilometers of this stuff down there. So what is the actual impact? Well, the answer, it is probably not what you're thinking. So to really get a handle on their impact, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of this thing. And a great way to think about it isn't as some kind of foreign intrusion, but more like our planet's own hidden nervous system. And this map is a fantastic real-world example. These aren't just random wires tossed into the sea. They follow these incredibly carefully planned routes. What you're looking at here off the coast of Australia are designated cable protection zones. This is where those huge international cables actually make landfall, physically connecting one continent to another. All right, let's dive into the core of the issue here, because there is a huge gap, a real disconnect between what most of us imagine is on the seafloor and what's actually down there. So, in our minds, we picture these enormous disruptive structures, right? Huge trenches scarring the ocean floor for miles. But the reality for a deep-sea fiber optic cable is something about the size of a regular garden hose, just laid carefully on the seabed. That's it. And what are these garden hoses even made of? Well, just look at this breakdown. It's almost all inert, stable materials. We're talking glass fibers, steel strands, a copper conductor, and a tough plastic sheath that's basically non-reactive. But here's the crucial part, what's not in them. There are no toxic anti-fouling agents, the kind of stuff you'd find painted on a ship's hull. Okay, so we've established they're physically small and chemically pretty boring. So what happens when they actually meet marine life? Well, this is where the story takes a really unexpected turn. Yeah, far from being a dead zone, these cables can actually become a foundation for new life. I mean, think about it. If you're on a vast, soft, muddy part of the seafloor, there's nothing to grab onto. Suddenly, here's this hard surface, and you can see it right here. Delicate corals and other organisms colonize it, creating a whole mini ecosystem. The cable literally becomes an artificial reef. And hey, this isn't just a one-off photo. The science backs this up. Multiple studies have looked for negative impacts on the local sea life, and they've found, well, basically nothing. This quote from a 2006 study is pretty clear. There's no statistical difference in life a meter away from the cable versus 100 meters away. The animals just don't seem to mind. But what about installing them? Good question. In shallower waters, where cables need protection from things like ship anchors, they're buried using these cool, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, like the one you see here. The key thing to know is that the disturbance is incredibly narrow, and it's a one-time event. They do it once, and that cable is set for its entire 25-year lifespan. And to put that one-time event into perspective, let's compare it to another human activity, bottom trawl fishing. That has been described as industrial-scale agricultural plowing on the seafloor. It's repetitive and it's widespread. The impact of laying a cable isn't even in the same league, not even close. Now, you might have heard stories about whales, and it's true. Way back in the day, the old, slack telegraphic cables did cause entanglements. But just look at this timeline. As the technology got better, moving to coaxial in the 50s, then modern fiber optics, the problem was completely engineered away. It's a problem that just doesn't happen anymore. And get this, sharks. Yes, believe it or not, sharks used to be a problem. They would bite the early cables and cause faults. But just like with the whales, engineers identified the issue and solved it with tougher, more durable designs. The bite problem, as they called it, has been greatly reduced. So if the technology itself has a minimal impact and the old problems have been solved, where does the real friction come from? Well, often it's from the very rules we write to govern it. Let's look at a real-world example. Guidelines from the OSPR Commission, which protects the marine environment of the Northeast Atlantic. They raise concerns about oil leaks, but that technology is totally obsolete. They claim burying a cable is lethal to some species, but they don't cite a single study to back it up. They suggest bundling cables with pipelines, which is incredibly dangerous. And they say old cables must be removed, even though ripping them up can cause way more harm than just leaving them in place. So you have to ask yourself, how did this happen? Well, the answer is kind of stunning. These rules were written without consulting a single expert from the actual cable industries. So you end up with regulations based on outdated information and just plain flawed assumptions. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's pull back to the big picture. What is the real, total environmental footprint of this entire global network? 7 grams of CO2 equivalent. What on earth is that? Just keep that number in your head for 1 second. That 7 grams is the ridiculously small carbon footprint of sending huge amounts of data over these cables. And this chart shows you their biggest positive impact. A video conference between New York and Stockholm, made possible by these cables, generates under 6 kilograms of CO2. The flight to do the same meeting? Almost 2,000 kilograms. These cables are a massively powerful tool for decarbonization. So let's sum it all up. The takeaway is pretty clear. The direct impact on the ocean? It's minimal, sometimes even positive, creating new habitats. Those historical problems we've heard about have been solved by better engineering. And maybe most importantly, their biggest contribution is enabling the low-carbon, connected world we all rely on. So this leaves us with a final, really important question. It seems the real danger isn't the technology itself, but our misunderstanding of it. The challenge for us is, how do we make sure the rules we write to protect our oceans are based on the best available science and real evidence, not on outdated fears? That's the puzzle we really need to solve.